Hi, I'm Whitney Espich, the CEO of the MIT Alumni Association, and I hope you enjoy this digital production created for alumni and friends like you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the MIT Career Lunch and Learn Resume Webinar, Resume Workshop with Recruiters. My name is Joe McGonigal, and I'm in the MIT Alumni Office, and delighted to be with you here today. We've got three professionals who want to talk about resumes with you, and thanks to all who submitted some resumes to be voluntarily critiqued on air. I've got some housekeeping here briefly before we meet our panelists. We are broadcasting this live on Zoom, and an archive of this will be made available after the fact. We will send an archive link out to our registrants within a week's time. We are having breakouts today for our three panelists, and you all received links to those breakouts, individual breakouts, to talk more with them and ask them some tough questions after our general discussion today. If you don't see a Q&A on your toolbar, you can usually toggle your mouse over it and find it. The Q&A is where you can ask questions that we can discuss on air with our panelists, and I will field as many of them as I can in our 45 minutes discussion here today. You can also upvote each other's questions as you see fit. And we'll talk about some of your resumes today. I did get a chance to forward all the resumes to our panelists today and have them to think about some observations on them for homework. But if we don't get to yours and you are still in need of career services and programs, of course, the MIT Alumni Office is here at your service. You can visit alum.mit.edu/careers for help and guidance. We've got two alumni and one non-alum from three companies today who employ their fair share of MIT alumni, so there's no doubt they'll have plenty of wisdom to share and to bear on your resumes today. They are Patricia Holt from Boston Consulting Group Gamma, Mark Herschberg, class of 95, MEng 97 and 05, CTO of Averon, and Karen Ho, director at Barclays Investment Bank, class of 94. Panelists, thanks for patching in today, and let's go in that order. And would you just open up by telling us a little bit about yourselves, where you are in your career, and what you might offer us today for advice. Patty, can we start with you?
Sure. Hello, everyone. So I work for Boston Consulting Group. I am a recruiter with them. I am specifically out of one of our digital practices. BCG has two main areas. One is the management consulting, which a lot of individuals know us as. And then now and most recently, we also have a large area. It's called Digital BCG. We employ a lot of MIT alumni, and I'm specifically out of our Gamma group, which is our data science and analytics division. Within Gamma, we also have several different groups. Some are specifically data scientists. We also have a group that specializes in machine learning as well as software engineering, and then, of course, on the analytics side as well. So as far as what I specifically do, I'm a recruiter there. I recruit for all levels, from partner all the way down to an associate level, which is our kind of entry-level positions. But I'm really excited to join. As I mentioned, we employ a lot of MIT alumni at all different levels. Yeah.
That was my mute. Sorry. Mark?
Okay, good.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mark Herschberg. I was class of 95, the 97, EECS and physics. Most of my career has been spent doing classic tech startup companies. I've helped a couple of Fortune 500s play startup, and I've consulted at times. But really, I'm a startup guy. In doing so, not only have I directly hired hundreds of engineers for my teams, engineers, data scientists related. I've also been the de facto HR person because at a startup of 50, 80 people, we might not have HR, or HR might be a very junior and experienced person. So I've also hired people in marketing, in accounting, in sales, in many other roles. I've probably interviewed well over 1,000 people. I've looked at tens of thousands of resumes, and that's just within my professional life. I've been teaching at MIT's UPOP program for years, mentoring MIT students, mentoring in some other programs. So I spent a lot of time focusing on people's professional efficacies and giving them career help. I'll also note, in a little bit of self-promotion, I have a book coming out this spring with a working title of The Career Toolkit. We'll see what my editor finalizes on, teaching skills related to your profession, such as creating career plans and interviewing and things along these lines. So I spent many years thinking about this and developing materials on many of the topics we're going to talk about today.
Great, thank you, Mark. And Karen Ho.
Hi, everyone. My name's Karen. I was course 6-3, class of 94. I live in New York. I've had pretty much, if you look at the spectrum of 6-3 careers, the exact opposite career of Mark. So I've been in investment banking technology since graduation. So big international global banks, running the gamut from investment banking to commercial banking to retail. I currently run fixed income trading technology at Barclays. Barclays is a huge employer of MIT alums, right, in trading and technology, quantitative research. So a lot of opportunity here. I've actually only been at Barclays for 2 months. So I have recent experience in having to put together a resume in addition to looking at other resumes. So I look forward to hearing from folks on this call.
Great, thank you, Karen. And we're going to send some feedback to Zoom that they have to play nicer with investment banks like Barclays in allowing video. But for those of you tuning in, you're listening to Karen as though you're listening to the radio. It's fine. I hope you can still get as much out of that. Karen, Mark, and Patty, thank you again for patching in here. Let's just start with some essential questions about resumes, and then we'll dive in and look at some actual crowdsourced resumes here. And again, if you're just joining us, feel free to use the Q&A function to ask questions of our panelists as things come up. I will pop up the breakout links a couple times more in the hour if you didn't get them in your email this morning. For those of you who want to continue the discussion after the webinar, each of our 3 panelists has volunteered to talk briefly more with you about specifics about their work. But for an opening question here, we've heard about the 6-second scan. Panelists, can you tell us if you use something akin to that, or if you have 1 to 2, 3 priorities that you look at when you first look at a resume, cover letter, or a candidate package? What are those first couple of attractions for you, and what makes a resume truly pop? Can we go in that same order, maybe, Patty?
Sure. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's 6 seconds. I think especially for more experienced hires, I think as a recruiter, you have to do your due diligence to make sure that you have a good understanding as far as, what each person has to offer. Things that I look at specifically when I'm looking at a resume, and typically, I would say a good rule of thumb is to maybe be able to figure out what type of role this person is looking for. Is their education listed on there? For BCG, education is really important. It's a requirement as far as a degree. So that's really important to have, especially at the forefront. I also think as far as figuring out what type of role this person is in the tech space, is this person going to be somebody that's management? Are they going to be hands-on technically, or are they open to something that's a mixture of both? So I think that having kind of a clear idea when you first look at the resume is important. One thing that I see a lot is it's easier to see that objective by using bullet points rather than a paragraph. Sometimes I do see, especially if you've been in a management position or you've been in a position for a long time, sometimes it can be overcomplicated. in a resume, and by not putting bullet points, you're not getting the most important aspects out of that, and it can be overlooked. So I think under a minute as far as a scan, to make sure that you have a very clear objective as far as what type of position you're looking for and applying for.
I would say I do about 20 seconds per resume. And now it will vary greatly. If I'm looking at a non-entry level software engineer, those are so hard to find these days. Anyone that comes in, it's very exciting. You get a resume, you will give it your focus. On the other hand, when I post a job for, say, a director of finance at one of my startups or a VP of marketing, I will be getting 20 resumes a day. And at that point, between meetings, between other things, okay, let me just go through and I'll quickly skim them about 20 seconds each. So what I'm looking for there, especially as you get to these more senior roles, is this ballpark what I'm looking for? All of us, when we came out of school, kind of looked the same because we all have basically blank slates. But once you're 10, 20 years into your career, what you've done as a director of finance compared to someone else's director of finance or a software engineer or whatever your industry is, it starts to get different. And so I'm going to skim through your resume to understand what have you been doing. I'm going to look for a few things, some titles, your companies, those are positive signals. Just as MIT, okay, that's a signal. You went to MIT, you're clearly not dumb. If you worked for a brand name company, okay, again, that's a positive signal. Now, those are usually easy to spot because we emphasize them in a standard resume format. Another good thing to have, recognizing that the eye will be drawn to those kind of bolded lines of the title and company, the maybe key point for a job should be right underneath as a first bullet point or first sentence if you're doing prose. And numbers also tend to stand out. It's something we'll probably talk about a little later in the resume section, showing numbers like 50% annual growth or hired 40 people or whatever number is appropriate, making sure that stands out in some way. You could even try maybe slightly bigger font. I've actually debated on my resumes whether I should even bold certain areas to help draw the eye to it during that scan. But you really want to get to just a couple of key things because I'm just looking for, are you qualified? Is it worth my spending another 3 minutes really going through your resume? And 20 seconds, you just have to have a couple things that say whether you're in or out for that time.
Karen? What do you first look at, Karen?
Yeah, I think 3 things in particular. I like Mark, I look at the structure, right? Are you able to group your experience in 3 to 5 bullets or easy to read chunks? In terms of content, right? So 2 things. Are you able to articulate the problem statement that you were faced with? And more importantly, how did you solve it, right? How did you specifically contribute to the solution? And then finally, how did you disrupt the status quo, right? It's one thing to be able to answer a question, but how did you address it in a way that you could scale it or grow the business or bring in additional revenue?
Great, good. How about anything else on, and this can be free for all here, experienced hires, and anything particularly for those alums tuning in with 10 to 20 years experience in terms of general advice? We'll look at some of those resumes coming up, but any particular things you look for when you know you've got somebody who's 20 years into their career, maybe making a mid-career transition, transferable skills, they've been in a different industry, etc. Or if they're in the sweet spot of your industry and they're 20 years in.
I'll add at that level, certainly everyone should have dropped the objective part of their resume. That should go away after about 3 or 5 years out of school. But you'll typically have some type of summary paragraph or bullet points at the top. And that's a great place to emphasize some wins that you've had, some successes, some key skills that differentiate you. And so that's a really good place because certainly our eyes are going to be drawn if you've got that opening section. We're going to focus on that. And that's how you can tailor that even to the role you're applying to show, here's 3 things I did that I think you're going to want to see. That will always get our attention.
Patty or Karen, anything? No.
Yeah, I actually really enjoy seeing the resumes of with folks who have had a full career, right? And I would say don't feel like you need to include everything, but I do like to read the resume when it tells a story of how you started in one job and you moved into a different company, you wanted to move into a different career and you tried this. And it should, when you step back and you look at the resume, it should tell a great narrative of who you've been and what you've been doing for the last 20, 30 years of your life, right? And I think those folks are the ones that bring the most to a company. Right?
Yeah, and I tend to agree too. I know specifically at BCG, we like to see where you started and how you've progressed in your career. Specifically, for example, in our Gamma department, every single person, even up to our CTO, is very technical. So if you started first, out of school, you were a software engineer, that's something that is a really big plus for us. So even if you don't have a lot of bullet points for, when you first started out of college, I would say still, list that you have that experience, because it does tell a great story and how you've evolved.
I want to contrast those 2 points. And I suspect that makes sense for your organizations where you hire people and they can have a long career path. At startup companies, we don't care about your story. I care about, I have a problem. There's something that I needed to do 6 months ago. I finally have budget to hire for this person. Can you come in the door and do that day one? I don't care what your story is. I don't care if you've transitioned between 7 different industries. I care, and I think this is true in general startups, can you solve the problem I have today? Because 2 years from now, I don't know what the org will look like. We have our dreams about how we're going to grow, want people to evolve, and the dreams never work out as you expect. Can you solve my problem today? That's all I care about.
We're not going to look at any cover letters today, but Karen, you mentioned, tell the story. Cover letters do that job a lot of the time as well to complement the resume, but any particular advice for the story you tell in the resume as it complements the story being told by the cover letter, or vice versa? And then, of course, we're already getting the question about ageism, and how unconscious bias around any demographic can enter into the hiring practice, and are there ways that you can thwart that in any of the language you choose, or the way you tell your story, especially if you're 20 plus years in 10 to 20 plus years into your career? Anybody jump in on that?
I don't know if this is directly answering the question. I always tell people, certainly include a cover letter. Most people don't read it. When I'm doing the 20-second scan, I am not reading it, because I don't want to waste my time reading your cover letter unless I know you're someone worth my time, which I tell from the resume. But still include it, because once I do put you in the inclusion set, now I want to see, okay, I've got some data, I've got the little facts off your resume, but now can you give me a little story about how you can solve my problem? And again, it comes down to, and I don't know if this is true for the larger enterprises, but I want to see in your pros, my job says I need you to do A, B, and C, whether I put it in the job requirement or you kind of understand it by the nature of the role. So you need to explain, hey, I can do A. In fact, I did A over here, and here's the problem, and here's what happened. And I haven't done B yet, but I've done this similar thing, and that's why I'm confident I can do B, and hopefully I just convinced you. And so you're going to address those points. You've got a little more time within that cover letter. But to me, the cover letter, it's not going to be read at first, but once you've passed that first resume scan, now you're telling me how you can solve my problem exactly, how you fit for that role.
Yeah, for me personally, it kind of runs around the same lines, that I usually don't look at a cover letter unless there's 2 things. One is that maybe I'm on the fence about someone, and I want to learn a little bit more that I didn't get from their resume, or if it's someone that maybe has applied for a position, for example, maybe they've been a manager of people, and they want to, maybe they don't like managing people, and they want to either take a lateral or they want to take a step back and be more of an individual contributor. So if they are applying for a role that you think may be a step back, because a lot of the times I look at that and say, okay, what is the story here? But I would definitely say 70% of the time I'm not looking at a cover letter. But if you are in one of those circumstances, that's the only time.
Yeah, cover letters, I think it depends for me on the avenue that I receive the resume. If it's just an independent email, I do like to see some background in the story. If it's through a resume drop, I probably just look at a bunch of resumes, right, without the cover letter.
But can you talk about to what extent, Mark, you mentioned skip the objective portion if you're more experienced hire. Can you talk about anything else about conveying your outside of your experience, outside of your education and the other sections of your resume? Any vision or especially if you're aiming at a leadership role, management style, leadership ethos, etc.
Sure.
Where should that be included in a resume?
Yeah, I think this is very difficult to do. Now, some of it will come through when either in your bullet points or prose about a particular topic, you might say, turned around a demoralized team from 6 people, and then grew the team to 20, and you can kind of weave in some of those things. I'll show you one thing I add to my resume a few years back. I didn't come up with this idea. I saw it on a candidate's resume, and it stood out to me. I thought, this is brilliant. Because all our resumes are going to say things like, I built software, right? Every one of us who's been a software engineer, I built software. We've all done that at some level. And it's just what that software is. I've also, if I've had director role or VP role, I've managed people, right? And you throw in some numbers, but it doesn't really help us get deeper. And I saw in this one resume, I'm gonna do a quick screen share now. So this is my resume. Is that up? Are you able to see it? Okay, so down here at the bottom, there's this philosophy section, and this is what I saw some other person did. And so these are some of the things, how I think about software. The first line comes from a book, Peopleware, that heavily impacted how I think about software, my feelings on technical debt and temporary code, how I think about management, right? It's not, I don't need to have all the answers. And probably these things are not necessarily that different than what other CTOs think. Usually by the time you're experienced, I don't have to have every answer. I don't have to pretend I know everything. We know we don't. But the fact that I express it in here, I think stands out a little and helps to just kind of convey myself in a different way. I haven't really done many job searches with this. I haven't had strong feedback if this works, if this is stupid. But it really impressed me to the point that I did it. I'll note one other thing just above that. You see I have my technology section, and this is something within tech specific. I hate all the buzzword bingo that we have to do in tech. And unfortunately, we have to do it because there's someone, unfortunately, typically in HR, sorry, Patty, who says, oh, the job says you need Mongo. Okay, keyword search Mongo, keyword search this. And I don't like throwing the details. It really doesn't matter what database I particularly used in most of the companies. And so I try to keep that out, but I throw it down on the bottom because I know somewhere on my resume I need the keyword, because some executive recruiter is doing some search and they need to know I can check that box.
Karen or Patty, any reaction? Thanks for that, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely fantastic. I also like the fact that looking at those technologies, that you had specifically what you were proficient at as well as what you were a little rusty at. So I think that's I don't see that a lot, but I really like that, and that would help definitely as far as looking at your resume and figuring out what you're looking for.
Good. I am a little aware of the time here. We're 20 minutes in and we haven't looked at a resume yet. So I mean, we looked at Mark's, but let me try my screen share and share some resumes with you panelists. Would love your take on a selection I've picked here. Let me make sure I get this up correctly. And I'm going to do my best, viewers, to hide contact information, but rest assured in our archive video, we'll blur it out. Suffice to say, this is David's, David's resume, and we've got summary information up top here, right into experience. I'm just going to scroll down, but I'll come back. Several jobs he's held, David, right on down through a couple of industries. It looks like scientific experience as well. So he's got that blocked out in a different section. Education, continuing education, publications, and other interests at the bottom. You know, it's 3 pages. Any particular, maybe we can try that sandwich technique, panelists, if there's something you love about it, something right away that you would change about it, fix about it. Anything jumping out for David?
So as far as what I like about it is I think that you've got a really varied background. You've got management on there, you've got development experience, so you can, you know, obviously work with teams as well as an individual contributor. One thing that I would suggest is when I look at the resume, I highly recommend putting bullet points in there just because some of the content gets a little bit lost. I would also, you know, try to highlight, you know, what type of position are you looking for? Are you looking for a management position? Are you looking for a development position? You have a lot of great things on here, but I think it gets a little bit lost.
Yeah, I would agree. I agree with Patty's comments. I mean, it's clean, right? The language is, you know, equally spaced, so visually it looks very good. I would say when it looks like the objective, you're looking for a project management role, but then in the experience, you talk about being a developer and being a consultant and being a CTO, and it's almost like in the summary, maybe just adding a sentence saying, hey, look, you know, I want to tie together all of my various experiences. I think I can use that as, you know, as a great background. I can leverage this experience so that I can be a great project manager because I've done it all before, or something like that to show that how does it add value? How does your background add value to you being a project manager? Otherwise, I think it looks very good.
That's related, Karen, to a question we had. If my experience is ranged across business development, operations, and strategy, where and when in my resume do I specify what I'm looking for? If I've got, you know, 2 or 3 areas, directions I could go. But you would put it up there. I
would put it in the summary and call it out and say, look, you know, I've done a lot of different things. I feel like I'm at that point in my career where I can synthesize and there are synergies between those experiences and I can bring something of you know, value add to your organization.
Yeah, it's right there at your top. Experienced project manager with a solid background, and you can talk about, you know, the web development that you do. You can tie in with some management experience. You can emphasize that in there. But those first 3 words, experienced project manager, tell me exactly what you're looking for. I will say, I think the other comments covered most of this. The one thing I didn't quite like is I think the job titles get a little lost because you've got the bold line that tells me where and when you worked. And then even though you've italicized the title, it's, as I'm skimming this, it's just so easy for it to flow in. So possibly indenting slightly or using a different font or even bolding that as well. Just something to make that stand out during that kind of quick scan.
Good. In the interest of time, again, I'll skip ahead to a second resume. I just want to make sure everybody can see a second one now. Can you see Ingrid's? And Ingrid profile here. I'll try to make this a little larger if you can see. Big heading at the top. Strengths include skills listed up top, and then into our sections on experience with company names and titles, bullet points.
Yeah, Ingrid, I really liked your resume. I like you've got a lot of good numbers in there. And this is something that if you can do this, please do this. Talk about, I led X people, I grew Y%, I brought in Z business, whatever it is, throw in those numbers. Because everyone says, oh, I helped grow sales. Well, okay, great. What does that mean? Did you grow at 2% or did you grow at 200%? Because I want to talk to that second person. So if the numbers are good, we don't all have good numbers for everything we've done, but anywhere you do have good numbers, try to put that in because that helps quantify it and goes from, yeah, I like to help my company too, to this is what I've achieved. And that really speaks volumes.
Yeah, I agree with Mark. It's, this is some great experience and some great content. You almost need to just bring it up a level and, talk about how it wasn't just about developing the project management models. You were innovating and building upon it and, disrupting the status quo. Right? You really want to show how are you differentiating yourself from everyone else in that role.
And I see you have bolded a few things. Down at the bottom, I see the awarded sales achievement, 100% quota. So that's nice, right? It's, as I'm skimming this, I see the bold of where you were, what your title was. Oh, look, that's bold too. Hey, that's really good. So I would encourage others to use a technique like that where you might bold something. Because especially to Patty's points about bullet points might be easier to read, when you have this many bullet points, what's in the middle, bullet point number 6 in one of these, it's just as kind of buried as what we saw on I think it was David's resume, where it's like the third sentence is the middle of the paragraph. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have all these bullet points. They generally, from what I saw earlier, are all strong things you should include, but it helps to re-emphasize certain things when you've got this much prose on your resume.
And another thing that I noticed too, I think the format is great. It's very kind of straight to the point. I like what is bolded. One thing, and I don't know kind of your personal circumstance, but I did notice at the top you have bolded that you're pursuing a master's in finance full time. And like I said, I don't know the situation, but what does part-time mean? Is that meaning that you're only available for 20 hours a week? Does that mean that you're taking courses that are, you can take them virtually whenever you can? It's just sometimes depending on the company, they may look at that and say, okay, this person is only looking for a part-time position, or maybe they can't dedicate, the time needed. So I would just, make sure that you, if you're putting that on there, that you know what kind of company that you are and type of person or type of position that you are applying for, because it can be a little bit of a flag if it's a company that, it's a full-time position.
Let me just ask two technical questions. Panelists, do you have a preference over the use of I in maybe the description up top to say I am X, Y, or Z, or as Ingrid, I've seen this a lot in resumes. Ingrid does, no reference to a personal pronoun or full complete sentences. I guess is what I'm asking. Does one turn you off more than the other as a reader?
I don't see a lot of I am, and it's kind of implied, right? I know this resume is about you. I don't need you to qualify it. And I don't think it would hurt you in any way. Certainly this way it does not. This is the standard version. Maybe it would catch my eye if you say I am Fu. That might almost be a little weird, but I don't think it would ding you in any way.
Mm-hmm. Another one, this from James. Thank you for sending this in, James. We've got an objective up top, education next, experience. all at Whoosh Innovations here on the first page into other companies on the second page. Hope you can read that.
So James, you missed a big opportunity here. I'm going to share a story from when I was an undergrad and I was interviewing for my first job. The best thing I had on my resume was trained as a professional bartender by New England School of Professional Bartending. And that's because even though I had a couple MIT degrees, so did everyone else sitting in the career office at the time. And every single person interviewing me knew who I was ahead of time because they remembered my resume. They were excited to talk to me because I was the only person they interviewed probably across any campus who was listed as a certified bartender. And so that helped me stand out. Now, certainly for those of us, if you're class of 2019, you look like everyone else 2019. Most people on this webinar, we tend to be experienced 10 years in, 20 years in. You no longer look like me. I don't look like you. We've done different things. But still, we've all done things. And what really stands out, so you've done Whoosh, and Whoosh, I actually know Whoosh because it was featured on The Daily Show and on CNN and on all these other, I'm sure you know better than I do, all the places where you got media attention. And so I would have somewhere right at the top, put that link and say, as featured on CNN, The Daily Show, whatever other things, because I have never seen that in any resume anywhere. This is a chance for you to be completely unique and memorable. And people, even if they're not hiring you today, they're going to remember, oh yeah, that guy who did Whoosh, that guy who got national media attention. So for anyone, if you have anything that is that unique, that can really help you stand out, absolutely put it front and center, because that will be key.
Good.
I really love this resume. I think, right, it talks about how you're innovative and creative, and most employers, it's in English. Like, I can read about it, I understand it. I know nothing about Whoosh Innovations, but I can visualize what you did. Right? I think it tells a great story about yourself, and it's interesting, and I think I would love to know more about what you've done in your experience.
Good. How about Melissa? Melissa, thank you for volunteering. Anything you love about it right away? It strikes you? Any quick hits for Melissa on quick fixes? Experience into technical skills and education last. Sorry, publication.
I like the numbers that get included in here. I think that again really makes you unique and not just I do things like everyone else tries to do, but I've done it. You buried a few things in there, maybe, or further down. Like I saw you had a patent somewhere listed in the middle, and so I might not get that in a skim, but if you had a section calling out your patents, that would just help pull it out for me. I like your the summary there where you've talked about scientists and military and healthcare, and that's great because I might need someone who can talk to multiple groups. The only thing that maybe gets me a little is your bullet points are physically a little large, and this might be super nitpicky and probably won't make a difference, but because when I look and I'm doing that quick skim and I'm looking for what's bold, so I see revolution medicine, I see basic research and clinical and translational research at top. That's what's drawing my eye. But then the left of your resume, my eyes always getting drawn to what look like these very big, bold bullet points. And as I'm scanning your resume, you don't want me to notice the bullet points. You want me to notice first year sales of $400,000 or 500 patients in this trial. That's where I should be looking, not the bullet points.
Great.
One thing I really love too is that you were a founder of a company and it started in 2011. So, you've been working with that company for a while. it's great. We love entrepreneurs, and to found a company. I mean, you're doing a lot of different things, and you've got your hands in a lot of different pots. One thing I think that when I'm first glancing at this is, what type of position are you looking for? You've got a lot of skills that you've acquired as being a founder of a company. You've got a lot of research experience, but what are you trying to focus on? So I think that maybe at the top of your resume, maybe adding something about, is there a certain area that you're looking to focus on?
Thank you. Just time for a couple more here. Let's look at Bonnie's. It's a little bigger for you. Bonnie has a headline here and a subheading, and then 3 skills and descriptions of them for a heading before experience. Bullets, numbers, down to education, additional information.
So I really like this resume. I think that it is very well organized. I think that as far as the number of bullet points, you're pretty straight to the point. I see numbers on there. It's very specific. I really like the fact that you have the MBA and kind of where your expertise is, what you're looking for. I thought it was a really well-written resume.
Yeah. Go ahead, Karen.
Sorry. Yeah, I would echo that. I love that you've put out there the Wharton MBA, right? The MIT and Stanford engineering, right? You've just pretty much elevated yourself from the rest of any other applicant, right? I think visually it looks clean, right? You've grouped everything in 3s. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it looks just visually very appealing. You use a lot of action verbs. There are a lot of numbers in there. If you were to look at this resume, it conveys a lot of confidence and seniority.
I like how you broke out the top into the 3 sections. These are my 3 skills, the 3 things you should think of when you think of me, and you put some, information behind it. I might even bold the Wharton, Stanford, and MIT, because as Patty said, you put those 3 on, you're going to get anyone's attention, and you want to make sure they notice that it doesn't get lost because it's at the bottom of your opening section.
Joanne's resume here. Any quick hits for Joanne? And Joanne has been 20 years in this company.
So with this resume, because you've been there for 20 years, it's a lot under 1, and so it was a little hard to kind of look at and say, wow, this is so much. You might want to break this out into, and I don't know as much about your industry experience, but maybe there's a way to kind of group it into like 3 different types of activities you've done, from things that you've taught to things relating to tests, to something else. And that might help me go, okay, I can see she teaches this stuff. I can see here's her exam experience. Here's her other things. It's just a little easier for me to parse. But the numbers in here, by the way, are helpful. There's just so many because so much is going on. That's where I get a little lost.
And Karen or Patty, I don't want to steal your thunder here.
Yeah, I think with such a varied yet strong background, it's hard to tell what is it that you want to do, and it's clear you can do a lot. But what is your, what's the next step in your life that you're looking for?
And let's look at Scott's briefly. Thank you, Scott. Brief overview up top, skills in bullet points below. That might be the quickest education section I've seen, Scott, given the nice credentials you have and professional experience. Any quick hits for Scott, things you love?
I like how you've bolded certain things under some of the bullet points. That helps draw my attention as I do that quick scan. What should we be looking at? Oh, look, $25 million in cost reductions. Hey, that's great. Drove 100 million new contract signings. That helps stand out as I'm just quickly going through this.
Good. Well, let me just jump back into a couple of questions that certainly got some traction among the viewers here. Can any of you weigh in on this one, top vote getting question? Can you share your thoughts on how best to explain to recruiters why you left a bad job, whether it was a toxic manager you were leaving behind or a culture, without going into too much detail? Have you had that experience yourselves, or any ways you've seen of cleverly phrasing that in a resume or a cover letter?
So coming from a recruiter standpoint, I think that there's ways of phrasing that you don't have to necessarily give, you don't want to give too much detail, right? You can simply say something like, hey, just looking for a change in environment, change of pace. I don't think that you specifically should go too much into detail, just because that can raise a red flag. And honestly, it can, you're giving us a lot more information than you probably need to do that. So I would just keep it very simple and say, hey, I'm looking for a change in environment.
I think within the startup world, all of us have seen startups that have a bad culture or some crazy founder. I mean, that's par for the course. And having one, I don't think is, because we've all seen it, it's not a reflection on you. So saying something, you don't want to trash talk this former employer, saying something like, the company, I was there, but it really wasn't a good cultural fit for me. And so after a year, I felt it was really time for me to find a better fit. So I want to make sure at the end we get a chance to talk about what your corporate culture is like, so we can make sure it's a good fit from both sides. And so we get that something happened. It's probably not you. If that happens in 6 of your jobs, I start to think it's you. But if it happens in a place, maybe 2, if you've had 12 different jobs, that's the way the world works.
Karen, any final thought on that? Related question. Go ahead.
No, I would just say if don't offer, don't answer anything you're not being asked. Right?
You don't have something nice to say also. Don't say anything at all. How do you explain that you came from a startup that closed or failed? That the market was toxic, not the employees or the leader. In an experience section, do you even say that?
If your company shut down in 2010, I don't think you have much to explain. We all knew what was going on. It's the same thing when your company shuttered in 2001. But here's the thing. There's that expression: success has many fathers, failure is an orphan. Why didn't a company work? Well, maybe it's because those sales guys were incompetent, or maybe because it was such a bad product, or maybe they didn't know how to fundraise, or who knows, right? And really, if you asked everyone, they'd all point fingers at someone else. And I don't have the time to know or tell. So I'm going to assume probably, unless you were the CEO or founder, there was only so much you could do. And so I don't see that as a reflection on you. But if you can show me, hey, the product didn't sell, but boy, I built a system that could handle this much processing. Wasn't that cool? I got these patents. Well, I closed all these sales or marketing deals. The company just then didn't get enough funding or margins were off. Okay, but I saw what you did, and that's what I care about, not what the company did.
We are going to get to our breakouts very shortly here, and I have viewers, I have pasted the breakout links as well into the Zoom webinar chat. If you have your chat open, you can see that. And I'll remind panelists, please don't click on your breakout link yet, because it will kick you out of this one. But why don't we just close with let's talk about an elephant in the room too around recruiting and resumes is LinkedIn. And any quick hot takes on LinkedIn profiles, panelists? What do you love about a great LinkedIn profile? Do you weight them more these days than resumes? Have you seen ones that really blew you away?
For me, when I see a good LinkedIn profile, I think what's important is you need to have on there what you want me to know. Like, for example, I would definitely put your title, the name of the company. Definitely, if you come from a school like MIT, have that information that's listed on there. It's very similar to a resume in that you want to make sure that, a few bullet points for each, position, I would say most recent positions. But also with LinkedIn, things to keep in mind as well is that LinkedIn is a great tool, especially for reaching out. Definitely reach out to recruiters on LinkedIn. They are looking at your profile. They are also, if you send in a resume and your LinkedIn profile is different than your resume, that sometimes can run a red flag. So just make sure it is the same.
Mark or Karen, anything to add? Good. Well, in the interest of time, I want to get to breakouts. I want to thank our guests. That's Patty Holt from BCG, Mark Herschberg from Averon, Karen Ho from Barclays Investment Bank. Thank you for joining us today, sharing some of your wisdom on this clever craft of resume writing. We will enter and open the breakouts in a moment. Mark will talk generally about leading the startup ecosystem. Patty, a little bit more about the BCG process and any specific questions you have for her. And likewise, Karen on Barclays Investment Bank. If you didn't get the links this morning in the email, I also pasted them into the webinar chat here as well. We have a bevy of resources for MIT alumni at alum.mit.edu/careers. You can sign up for future webinars there. We will repeat this one with some more experts on resumes at some point this year. You can join the Alumni Advisors Hub, get advice from your fellow alumni who are job seeking as well or in a position to hire. And you can sign up for regional hiring events as well. Questions about this webinar or feedback on it, please direct my way to alumniccareers@mit.edu. And thanks again to our panelists. And let's open the breakouts.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. And for more information on how to connect with the MIT Alumni Association, please visit our website.